Narcissism, as described by Sigmund Freud, is a manifestation of a complex interaction between unconscious desires, self-esteem, and relationships with others. In this context, narcissists tend to live in a world where the image they project is of vital importance, even if this image is deeply detached from their true self. Through this Freudian perspective, we can understand how certain characteristics of narcissism manifest tangibly in their environment, specifically in their home. The objects surrounding a narcissist are not merely decorations or possessions, they are representations of their psyche and the defenses they use to protect their ego. Freud would help us understand that, beyond the surface, these objects conceal the deeper emotional and psychological dynamics of their being. First and foremost, one of the most significant objects found in a narcissist's home is the mirror. Freud, in his theory of narcissism, described how the individual falls in love with their own reflection, and this process of identification with the image reflects the narcissist's constant search for validation. The mirror, in this sense, is not just a functional object but a constant means to feed their ego. The narcissist spends long hours in front of it, adjusting, admiring, seeking perfection in their appearance. However, behind this superficial admiration lies deep insecurity, an inner void that can only be filled by the constant reaffirmation of their image. The mirror in a narcissist's home is an essential object, but also a psychological trap that reflects not only their face, but their desperate need for approval. Secondly, luxury items or those displaying high status are ubiquitous in a narcissist's home. Freud argued that the narcissist, in their search for power and validation, surrounds themselves with material symbols that represent their superiority over others. These objects are not simply for enjoyment, but serve as a way to demonstrate their worth. The lavish decor, high-end cars, jewelry, everything is carefully selected, not just for its quality, but for its symbolic power. However, Freud would point out that this desire for material possessions is not a true sign of success, but rather a defense mechanism against feelings of inadequacy and emotional fragility. Deep down, the narcissist needs constant approval from others to reaffirm their value. The third object that Freud might identify as crucial in a narcissist's home is a carefully curated library. The books present in a narcissist's home are more than simple reading materials. They are an extension of their ego and intellectual image. Freud, being an expert in the psychology of the unconscious, might interpret this collection as a way of seeking power and control through knowledge. The narcissist does not only want to be admired for their appearance, but also for their intellect. The books are tools of prestige and power, a means to impress others with an image of depth and sophistication. However, behind that intellectual facade, there might be a lack of genuine interest in the content of those books. For the narcissist, books are just another object that validates their image in front of others. The fourth object Freud might point out is a large portrait or photograph of themselves, prominently displayed in the home. Freud spoke of the ego as a center of psychic energy that seeks to affirm and defend itself. The portrait, in this case, is not just a representation of the narcissist, but a constant reaffirmation of their importance. The narcissist places these portraits in a prominent spot, like an altar to their own image. Through this object, they seek to keep their ego intact, creating a space where admiration and validation become constant needs. This portrait becomes a symbol of their identity, a constant reminder of their idealized self-image. Finally, Freud might identify the last object in a narcissist's home as a collection of awards or trophies. These prizes, often seeming to represent significant achievements, are actually external manifestations of an inner emptiness. The narcissist seeks validation through these objects, and their home becomes a sanctuary of public recognition. Freud would interpret these trophies not just as symbols of success, but as a way to defend against feelings of insecurity. The narcissist needs these objects not because they truly value what they represent, but because they grant them a sense of power and superiority over others. Each trophy is a barrier against vulnerability, a way to protect their ego from external threats. These 5 objects, though seemingly harmless, are actually indicative of the complex psychology behind narcissism. According to Freud, the narcissist lives in a world of psychological defenses, using objects to reaffirm their ego and protect themselves from the pain of a distorted self-image. Through these objects, the narcissist creates an environment where their idealized image can be constantly fed, but also reveals the fragility of their psyche. These objects are not just decorations, they are manifestations of the narcissist's internal struggle to find their value in a world where external validation is essential to their sense of identity. By understanding these objects from a Freudian perspective, we can gain deeper insight into how the narcissist's mind functions. It is not just about obsession with appearance or materialism, but a complex defensive system that unfolds in their home, where every object has a psychological purpose behind it. The objects in a narcissist's home are like pieces of a puzzle that help us understand the deeper dynamics of their mind, and how these dynamics affect their relationships with others and themselves. The objects found in a narcissist's home are not just there to fulfill a practical or aesthetic function. Each of them reflects the complex psychological architecture the narcissist has built over their life, a construction based on self-gratification, external validation, and constant defense of a fragile ego. Therefore, a narcissist's home is an extension of their identity, a space where the image they wish to project is surrounded by symbols that reinforce and protect their idealized self-image. Furniture and decorations in a narcissist's home are often carefully selected. While they may seem simply elegant or well-designed, they have a deeper purpose. Freud might argue that each piece in this space is intended to project an image of perfection and control. However, at the core, these objects also serve as a psychological shield. Every luxurious table, every designer lamp, every expensive rug represents an effort to create an environment in which the narcissist can feel safe, in control, and superior. The home becomes a sanctuary where they can escape from external criticism and find comfort in an environment that reaffirms their grandeur. On the other hand, the arrangement of these objects also reflects the need for control that narcissists often experience. Rooms, furniture, and even the walls themselves are carefully positioned to create a sense of harmony and balance that reflects the perfection the narcissist craves. Freud might interpret this tendency as a manifestation of the need to dominate and organize their surroundings in order to maintain control over the perceptions others have of them. In this sense, the arrangement of objects in the home is not just an aesthetic matter, but a representation of how the narcissist tries to manipulate their world to fit their idealized self-image. However, often hidden behind these objects and the control exerted over them is the narcissist's internal vulnerability. While it seems that the narcissist has created a perfectly controlled world, filled with objects that reinforce their superiority, they are, in reality, engaged in a constant battle with their insecurities. The objects in their home, far from being a sign of true happiness or satisfaction, are a reminder of their deepest fears. Freud would understand that the narcissist is trapped in a constant tension between the need to assert themselves through image and the emotional void they feel when external validation is insufficient to fill the inner emptiness. In this context, the narcissist also tends to accumulate objects with symbolic value, objects representing past achievements or external recognition. These trophies, diplomas, and medals, often displayed in their home, are not simply reminders of success, but serve as constant reminders of their supposed greatness. Freud might point out that the narcissist faces a psychological dilemma. On one hand, they need these objects to reaffirm their worth, but on the other hand, these material accumulations also reveal the fragility of their self-esteem. The trophy, far from being a symbol of personal satisfaction, becomes a constant necessity, a reminder that the narcissist cannot afford to lose the recognition these objects represent. The need to always be right and to be admired is another factor reflected in the objects of a narcissist's home. In the case of artwork or decor, It is not uncommon for the narcissist to choose pieces that are rare, unique, or extremely expensive. Freud might argue that this choice is not just an aesthetic one, but an unconscious desire to demonstrate their uniqueness and ability to excel. Owning something unique or rare gives the narcissist the feeling of being special, of being different from others. However, this desire for uniqueness hides a deep insecurity, as the singularity of these objects only accentuates the internal disconnect the narcissist feels with others. It is important to understand that these objects, while seemingly reinforcing the narcissist's external image of perfection, are also a form of self-defense. Freud might interpret the accumulation and display of these objects as a response to the deep fear of being seen as less than perfect. In their search to project an immaculate image, the narcissist creates an environment where everything is carefully selected and arranged to serve that purpose. But what the narcissist cannot hide is the crack in their psyche, the constant need for validation, and the fear of exposing their true feelings of inferiority. The objects in a narcissist's home are not just part of their visible identity, they are also a manifestation of their internal struggle. In every corner, in every carefully selected detail, the narcissist is trying to build a refuge that allows them to escape the anguish of criticism, shame, and self-doubt. These objects are symbols of an ego that needs constant feeding, and although they often appear to represent power and control, at their core, they are simply tools the narcissist uses to protect themselves from their own inner demons. Through these objects, Freud would reveal an unsettling truth. The narcissist is trapped in a constant cycle of external reaffirmation, but cannot escape their internal vulnerability. In their home, surrounded by objects that reflect their desire for perfection, the narcissist will never find true peace. For peace does not come from external validation, but from a process of self-acceptance and self-understanding. The objects in their home are merely a temporary refuge, a superficial layer that hides the cracks in their psyche. In a narcissist's home, the symbolism of the objects is not limited to aesthetics. It becomes a mirror of the internal struggle the individual faces. Every element, from the decor to the small details, plays a role in the grand stage where the narcissist tries to construct a perfect facade. It is not merely about a desire for luxury or beauty, but a deep psychological need for external validation. Freud might argue that the narcissist, by surrounding themselves with these objects, is trying to cover the deep wound of their insecurity and constant need for admiration. However, the pain of this insecurity is so great that all they manage to do is create a constant cycle of seeking approval that never subsides. This existential emptiness, often manifested in the obsession with accumulating material possessions, has deep roots in Freudian psychology. The narcissist, having not developed a solid sense of self-worth from early stages of life, continually seeks objects that can reinforce their sense of value. However, each object they obtain only provides temporary satisfaction. Freud might say that this behavior reflects a constant attempt to fill an emotional void that can never be fully filled, as the narcissist cannot reconnect with their true self. Additionally, the narcissist tends to use these objects as a way of exercising control over their environment. The objects are meticulously and carefully organized in an effort to ensure that their personal space reflects their power and importance. This control over the physical environment extends to the control the narcissist seeks to have over others, manipulating others' perceptions through the objects they possess. Each object, then, not only serves the narcissist's purpose of self-gratification, but also ensures that everyone else is constantly exposed to their superiority. The narcissist not only seeks admiration, but also power and influence, and the objects they choose are vehicles for achieving this. The relationship the narcissist forms with their home and the objects within it is also strongly connected to their need to avoid facing their true self. Rather than looking inward and trying to understand themselves, the narcissist constantly escapes through the consumption of objects and the pursuit of external admiration. The home becomes a refuge for the narcissist, a place where they can hide their vulnerability and emotional fragility behind a curtain of luxury and status symbols. In many cases, the objects in a narcissist's home also serve as a way to manipulate those around them. Relationships with others are seen as opportunities to strengthen their ego. The narcissist, therefore, surrounds themselves with objects that not only represent them, but also project the image that they have a superior lifestyle compared to others. In their home, those who visit feel dazzled by the opulence and luxury, reinforcing the narcissist's idea that their value is determined by external perception. Freud might observe that this dynamic is a defense mechanism of the ego, a way of coping with the fear of being perceived as insignificant or weak. On the other hand, the narcissist tends to avoid any object that connects them with their true vulnerability. It is rare to find objects in their home that represent moments of weakness, failure, or mistakes. The narcissist fears confronting any aspect of their life that does not live up to their self-idealization. Personal memories, those that could have sentimental or emotional value, are often ignored or discarded. The narcissist prefers to surround themselves with objects that reaffirm their image of perfection and success. Freud might interpret this lack of emotional connection with certain objects as an attempt to protect their fragile ego, avoiding anything that might remind them they are not as perfect as they pretend to be. However, in this process of self-deception, the narcissist finds themselves trapped in a vicious cycle. By constantly seeking external validation through objects, relationships, and material achievements, the narcissist moves further away from the possibility of genuine growth. Freud might argue that by avoiding confronting emotional wounds and internal conflicts, the narcissist condemns themselves to live in constant dissatisfaction. The objects they accumulate, far from being a solution, are merely a way to distract themselves from feelings of inadequacy that never disappear. Each achievement or material acquisition creates only a temporary illusion of well-being, but it never heals the deep emotional wound the narcissist carries. The home of a narcissist, with all its carefully chosen objects, is a stage where the ego is built and defended, but also a space where the deepest vulnerability is revealed. The objects are not only a reflection of their desire for control and superiority, but also a way to hide the fragility that lies beneath their facade. Freud, with his deep understanding of the unconscious, might point out that the narcissist, by filling their home with these objects, is not seeking to fill a material void, but an emotional one. The objects in the end are merely an external manifestation of an internal struggle that never ends, a struggle for recognition and validation that never reaches internal peace. Ultimately, the narcissist lives trapped in their own construction, a space full of objects that do not have the power to provide the happiness or genuine satisfaction they long for. While these objects may offer an illusion of grandeur, they will never fill the emotional void the narcissist experiences in their everyday life. According to Freud, this constant search for external validation is a defensive strategy that hides a much more painful reality: the lack of authentic connection with themselves and with others. The objects in a narcissist's home are merely a facade, and behind that facade lies a being who, though surrounded by luxury and wealth, is deeply empty inside. In the end, what we find in a narcissist's home is not just a collection of luxurious objects, but a series of symbols representing a constant internal struggle. Through these objects, the narcissist attempts to fill the emotional void that cannot be filled by money or external recognition. Each piece in their home is an attempt to construct a perfect facade. But behind that facade, the narcissist faces deep dissatisfaction that never resolves, because external validation is never enough to heal such a fragile ego. Freud, by understanding this dynamic, helps us see that what narcissists truly seek is not just admiration, but a way to connect with something more genuine and profound, something that, unfortunately, seems to elude them. It is in this emotional void that we find the key to understanding the nature of narcissism, a cycle that does not end with the acquisition of more objects or an increase in external admiration. In their struggle to reach perfection, the narcissist remains disconnected from themselves, trapped in an illusion that will never allow them to find peace. If this analysis has given you a new perspective on the behaviors and mechanisms of narcissism, I invite you to engage with this content. Your participation is not only crucial to continue the conversation, but also to help more people understand the psychological dynamics at play in narcissists' relationships and environments. The only way to begin overcoming these dynamics and finding a healthier way of living is to be aware of them. So don't forget to like, comment, and share this video with those who might benefit from this information. Every interaction you have with this content not only helps this message reach more people, but also contributes to building a more aware and empathetic community. If you're interested in exploring these deep topics further, subscribe and turn on notifications, because here we will continue to unravel more secrets of the human mind based on the psychology of great thinkers like Freud. I look forward to seeing you in the next video as we continue to discover the deeper layers of the human psyche together.